in 3 years.
Oh my goodness. I can't imagine.
There's a long ways to go.
Yeah.
Pete and Nancy were high school sweethearts in, they went to smaller town mid-state. Yeah, I can't think right now, not Plainfield, but something like that.
Something for them. Yeah, I don't know.
I haven't seen Mike in a long time. His kids, the triplets were.
Oh, sure, they're getting ready to go to college.
Yeah, that tells you a whole lot.
Yeah.
Good evening. Before tonight's Plan Commission, we have a public hearing. Read the notice.
Notice is hereby given that a joint public hearing will be held by the Town of Delafield Plan Commission and a staff representative of the Waukesha County Department of Parks and Land Use Planning and Zoning Division on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. at the Delafield Town Hall, located at West 302 North 1254 Maple Avenue, Delafield, Wisconsin 53018, to consider the conditional use request for CU 55 of Gregory Varga and Dana Solanke-Brohl, owner, and Badger Home Builders Tom Langen, applicant, for land altering activities associated with the construction of a new residence. The subject property is described as part of Lot 27 in Lakeside, a subdivision located in part of the southwest quarter of Section 12 and the northwest quarter of Section 13, Town 7 North, Range 18 East, Town of Delafield. More specifically, the property is located at North 31, West 28773, Lakewood Lane, Pewaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay. Tim, do you want to provide a brief overview? Oh, okay. I'll be coming.
All right. So, as shown on the screen, the property is on the south side of Lakewood Lane. It has varying topography, about 35 feet of grade change from the road to the south end of the property. The owners are proposing a new home and land altering activity associated with that. Several retaining walls are proposed, as well as some grading associated with the walls. Based on the Waukesha County Shoreline and Floodland Protection Ordinance, the grading that is proposed exceeds 4 feet of fill, which is the threshold for a conditional use permit. In 2017, former owners did propose a conditional use permit for a new home. At the time the item was tabled, the owners decided to move out of state, and that request was ultimately withdrawn. The new request is proposing retaining walls that will be located at least 5 feet from the side lot line, There is an attempt to divert drainage down the lot lines to the south end of the property to a proposed rain garden. The plan in your packet shows a 4-foot wide, or excuse me, a 8-foot diameter rain garden that's 4 feet deep. The plan was given to Waukesha County Land Resources staff for review. They commented that a rain garden in premise is a good idea to help divert some of the water, especially the runoff from going to the neighboring home down there to the south. However, they did question whether or not the sizing of the rain garden is appropriate. They would recommend instead a longer, skinnier rain garden, something like a 2-foot wide by 30-foot long, running along that south end of the property to help catch some of that additional runoff. The new plan does show or states that there are drainage swales. We question whether or not any swales are actually shown on the property, and it would probably have to be revised to show some better swales to divert that water again to the south rather than to the neighboring properties. Land Resources staff also questioned whether or not retaining walls were required for the project. They didn't think that it was necessarily a bad idea, but just wanted some additional clarification on what the purpose of the walls was for. Let's see here. And again, I think just reiterating that a rain garden to some extent is needed for the property. If you do make a motion to approve the project, we would consider a condition that a stormwater permit is obtained from Waukesha County Land Resources staff in order to ensure that the rain garden is appropriately treating the proposed runoff, and that a qualified professional is involved to oversee grading, erosion control, and sediment control on the property. It should also be noted that the property is currently vacant. However, as recently as approximately 2000, there was a home on the property, as evidenced by the GIS aerial imagery. However, by 2005, that house was removed, and it appears that the property has been vacant ever since.
Does anyone from the public wish to comment during the public hearing portion tonight? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Call to order the Delafield Plan Commission meeting. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes as prepared.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Any communications? I assume none.
Just a verbal one. I did get a call from the DOT regarding the Amherst Drive Bridge. Just wanted you to make aware of it. That was scheduled to be redone, I believe, next year. But they've got they found some money, or they received some money or something, and so they moved it up, and they're gonna be bidding that out this year. Probably starting to work sometime mid-late July. And then it's probably gonna take about a year before it reopens up. But I just wanted everybody to know that. It was just a telephone call, so just be aware of that.
Okay, thanks.
Mid to late July this year, potentially?
Pardon?
Mid to late July this year?
This year, yeah, they moved it up a year.
Oh,
So we're working on getting an informational meeting set up so that in the next
okay. It's kind of a big deal.
month or so, just so we can let people know. It's a little bit, I was a little surprised by that change myself, and I think we need to at least let people
Yeah, it's a big deal.
re-see
Thanks.
the plans again, so.
Entertain a motion to take 5A.
Motion to take items 5A and B out of order this evening.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, item 5A, James and Carol Krause, N7, W30010, Bryn Drive, reconsideration and possible action on a request for a 10-foot high garage on a proposed accessory building at N7W30010 Bryn Drive.
As mentioned in my report, the code requires that any garage doors that are over 9 feet in height require plan commission approval. The request is for a door to be 10 feet in height, primarily because of a camper that they have that has an air conditioning unit or some type of unit on top, and they want to have a garage that's high enough a garage door that's high enough so it doesn't get damaged. The structure can be placed by their house. The door will face east, which is towards their house. It is about 20 feet below the road, so it's likely that you won't see, you'll see the building, but it won't be right in front of you. It's actually down quite a ways. And so I have no issues with that, subject to them getting a building permit.
Any comments, questions?
Pretty straightforward. Motion to approve the allowance of the increase in the garage door height to 10 feet for the residents at N7W30010 Bryn Drive.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item 5B, Tom Langen, Badger Homes, Inc., agent, Gregory Varga and Dana Selenkbro, owner, regarding consideration and recommendations to Waukesha County regarding a grading permit on vacant lands located at N31W28771 Lakewood Lane, what we just held a public hearing about.
I'd just like to make a few comments about, Jake talked about the rain garden. This is a little bit different in the sense that sometimes rain gardens are just, they're depressions where you put in plantings that have deep roots, and that's how the water gets down into the soil. And they are gonna do that, but the intent is to make that rain garden about 4 feet deep and put stone into it. And then run I had talked to Mr. Langen about running the roof gutters underground to that 4-foot stone basin, I would say. Only because this is a narrow lot and to have more water running over land down that slope. I don't know if you went out there, but the slope is pretty substantial. And so if we can get most of the water off the hard surface and down into that rain garden, get some infiltration. The soils aren't great infiltratable soils, but at least if it's in that holding stone area, at least it gets some time to infiltrate down and kind of reduce the amount that's going to go over the ground. The swales around both sides would be directed to that same system as well. So we're trying to slow that water down, because all it does is it continues on down, and there's a house directly to the south of that. You can kind of see it up there.
And with the empty lot now, I assume all the water just runs off the lot.
It runs down the hill, but it's obviously vegetated, so it can slow down with the vegetation. So once again, it's got a lot of hard surfaces on that lot, so we want to make sure the water is taken care of before it just runs off to the neighbor to the south. And the only condition that I would have is that, that they identify swales through, the swales are somewhat shown through the contours, but to make them a little bit clear as to where we want swales, which is either along the lot lines or right next to the lot lines on their grading plan.
Have they had any correspondence from the neighbor south? Do we know?
I have not heard anything. We've had general inquiries about the project, but nobody's specifically reached out and voiced any concerns.
Okay.
And so and you're fairly comfortable with the plans that they've got drafted, the bulk of the water will stay on property, or at least consistent with past?
I think we're relatively confident. I think if we can, tweak the plan a little bit to, as Tim said, further redefine those swales and maybe just tweak that rain garden a little bit, Land Resources staff is pretty confident that that'll be able to treat the additional runoff that will be generated.
What did you mean by requiring a storm water permit?
So any time that we have excessive fill and land altering activities, a stormwater permit is really a way for our land resource land resources staff to review and make sure that, in this case, it's not gonna be creating adverse drainage. The rain garden will be, performing, in order to treat that additional runoff, and that's really the purpose of that permit.
If I could just add, part of the value there is that Land Resources then makes inspections, erosion control inspections, and they'll ensure that that rain garden is properly installed. Whereas a conventional, typical single-family home is just erosion control inspection done by the building inspector, so you're getting the stormwater and erosion experts on site.
So you want two conditions attached to any motion, a stormwater permit required and a land resource department inspection required?
That's part of the stormwater permit, which is really a good idea, because I think, rain garden's really misconceiving here. I mean, they're putting a stormwater pond in, basically.
Yeah, it's a retention pond.
It's a retention pond, and, I mean, I remember sitting up here in 2017, and I'm surprised the neighbor from the south isn't here, because, that was his big concern when we went through this, and, I mean, we talked for a couple hours about it at that time. And, I mean, do we know if they're gonna put any patios or anything back here? Because I know that was also, something that was brought up last time this was,
Nothing is currently proposed
okay.
for that area.
So any motion, we have two conditions, the swales shown on the grading plan and the stormwater permit.
Correct.
Okay.
And when you pull the stormwater permit, so the county, I mean, if there are any problems with the drainage, the county's kind of the hammer there, as far as, having been reviewing the plans and making sure that everything's done according to the plans?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the town gets involved as well. If
Well,
neighbors do
right.
call as staff here, we may get called, but we can bring the county in, because it's, they'll have the permit to be able to follow up. But once again, our building inspector will get this plan will be approved as part of the final plan will be approved as part of the whole building permit process.
No, it's just good sometimes to have two sets of eyes on
It
some of
does
these,
help, yeah.
some of these things, as they move pretty quickly, and with big machines, you can move a lot of dirt, so.
Yep.
That's it with my questions, if you want. Anything else?
If they make any additional alterations other than what they have here, do they have to come back in front of the,
I think we can approve it subject to the conditions that are, and let staff approve that. They're just small little, in essence, they have swales there, they probably could show them a little bit clearer on the plan, so there's no
What
question.
was your question if they made a major change to what they wanted?
Yeah.
Halfway through it, they decided to do something different?
Oh, yeah,
Then
yeah.
they gotta come
Then they
back.
would come back.
Yeah, if it's a major change, yeah, we would certainly bring it back for your review.
Is adding hardscape with the patios, is that a major change?
I guess, well,
Would
for-
impact the water.
For this plan, they're not really leaving themselves much room off the back of the home for a patio. There's maybe some room for some type of elevated deck, which I think at least allows for some better water infiltration. I think you could make that a condition, that if a deck is proposed and you wanted to further review that, you could. But I think that's certainly something that, staff, as part of the stormwater permit, would be reviewing as well.
No, that makes sense. I just brought it up because, once you move this dirt and build those retaining walls, it's gonna be
Correct.
pretty challenging to get any equipment to do any additional
Right.
landscaping back there.
No, it's
Yeah.
and this would stay with the property, so if the current owners of it sold it next year, would this stay with the property then?
When you pull that stormwater permit, I mean, what kind of regular inspections happen to make sure that thing is maintained? Like, is there a bond or anything that has to be put
Yes,
forth? Or?
so there is a bond that's taken in. There's a maintenance agreement that is also taken in that stipulates, what construction looks like, what the maintenance over a couple years looks like. Routine inspections will be performed by Land Resources Division staff throughout, start and end of project.
And once again, this is a little bit unique because it requires a conditional use, right? And a grading plan with this. Normal, single-family homes, we don't do that.
Right.
You know, in a regular subdivision, our building inspector will deal with the erosion control, but it's usually very minor. This one's got a lot of character to it, shall we say.
It's a unique property, to say the least.
And the motion is just to recommend approval to the county, correct?
Mhm.
I will make said motion to recommend to the Waukesha County regarding the grading permit on the vacant lands located at N31 W28771 Lakewood Lane, contingent to a stormwater permit being pulled and a qualified person to oversee the grading and construction and the erosion control, and that the swales are identified clearly on the grading plan.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Good. Item 4A, discussion and possible action on an amendment to town zoning code to create section 17.045R, Plan Development District Number 1. I know the county has some new materials to present to us, so I would ask for a motion to allow the county to make a short presentation.
Motion to allow the county to give a presentation to the Plan Commission.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Floor is yours, Jason.
Hello again, everyone. Just wanted to give a little bit of a summary of what was discussed at the last meeting. Thought we'd pull up the area map for you. It's been a little more than a month, so just to refresh your memory going around the horn, starting with Zone 1. Zone 1 was the one zone where nothing changed. The density of 1 unit per acre stayed in place. Zone 2 had been recommended by the work group at 3 units per acre, and your discussion at the last meeting was to take that to 2 units per acre, single family, 2.5 units per acre for condo type development. And what I should say is, once I go around here, I had a couple of phone calls after that last meeting and folks asking, you know, hey, what does a house on a 1/3 acre lot look like versus a 3/4 acre lot? And so we've got a couple of images we'll go to as well. Zone 3, same changes. Work group had recommended 3 units per acre. That was brought down to 2 units per acre single family, 2.5 units per acre condos. Again, lot size was also discussed in zones 2 and 3. The ordinance that had been brought forward to you had 10,000 square foot minimum lots. The discussion at the last meeting was to raise that up to roughly 1/3 of an acre, 15,000 square feet. In zones 5 and 6, the work group recommendation had been 4 units per acre for multifamily type development. That was, the discussion at the last meeting was to bring that number down to 3 units per acre for condo development. And then senior use is also an available use in those 2 zones. And your direction at the last meeting was to amend the maximum senior density from 12 units an acre down to 10. I think those were kind of the high-level highlights. Tim, Dan, or any of you commissioners, if I missed anything, fill in. So what I'd like to do next is go to some of those photos that I talked about. And we'll also take a look at the density on a full area basis. All those density numbers that we've been talking about exclude the environmental corridor. And so we'll talk about the significance of that as we go. So looking at the surrounding neighborhood, this exhibit that's behind me, we just grabbed, Jake had been out taking pictures for the height analysis portion of this project. And we just grabbed several of those images. You can see what the houses look like. These are in the immediate surrounding neighborhoods. So just grabbing several representative examples. Again, the calls that I was getting was, you know, hey, what do we see on third of an acre? So we looked for a couple of projects in Lake Country. The first is Pabst Farms out in Oconomowoc. This is actually the larger lot portion of Pabst Farms. If any of you have been out there, some of the newest phases are bringing forward lots as small as 9,000 square feet. This is one of the first phases that was built really just right opposite the YMCA. Same subdivision here. City of Pewaukee, this is a subdivision last 10 years or so. West side of Pewaukee, again, third of an acre lots. Another Pewaukee example, third of an acre. And then finally, this is the smaller lot size that I was alluding to. The newest phase, a little bit more simple. You see some of the architectural treatments, not as much stone and brick on these examples. As far as assessed values go, just going back to the surrounding neighborhood, generally kind of give or take $450,000, with some a little bit higher, some a little bit lower, but that's kind of the ballpark. The Pabst Farms and the Pewaukee examples that we looked at were actually just a little bit higher value. And as we work with properties all around the county, generally what we find is that the improvements on the property are the big driver in assessed value, not so much lot size itself. So just wanted to give that for context. Next, we'll go to, you might recall this exhibit from last time around. We've updated it based on the discussion of the last meeting. So again, there'd be a myriad of scenarios that we could put up on the screen based on whether office, you know, is a use that's proposed, or whether a senior is proposed here versus single family or multifamily there. We're just showing 7 potential scenarios. If you recall those initial scenarios that we showed, the traffic projections, no matter how we sliced and diced, they all came in somewhere right around 3,000 trips per day. That was before you started working at the last meeting. So when we reran these numbers this time around, generally lowered the traffic counts, the expected traffic counts by, you know, roughly 500 trips or so per day. And then what you can see down in the bottom, I'll just highlight this cell. This would be the total regular dwelling units that you would realize through each of these scenarios. So it varies widely. Again, scenario 7, as a for instance, would see senior all the way across zones 4, 5, and 6, and accordingly it brings your conventional dwelling unit count way down. As we talked about at the last meeting and through the work group process, we believe there's a ceiling on how many senior units there is market for. So while there may be a big number like 731 in scenario 7, from talking to those in the industry, they believe that it's more likely that there's market for a few hundred max to be absorbed in the local area. When we take a look, I alluded to the environmental corridor acreage. I just did some rough calculations. If we bring in the environmental corridor acreage, I'll see if I can get back to that exhibit. What I'm referencing for environmental corridor, so this corner here is all wooded in zone 2, and much of zone 1 is wooded in environmental corridor. when we bring that into the equation in zone 2 for instance, if we were to apply the 2 unit per acre density and bring the environmental corridor in, you're at about 1.5 units per acre. And so how does that relate to some of the other examples in the area? I'm going to see if I can get to yet another exhibit. I'm not sure if I've got that one at my fingertips, Jake. I'm looking for the one that shows the local density projects.
That second density examples,
Okay,
second, that other tab.
there we go. Thank you, Jake. So I thought it was kind of interesting when we look at Gulf Ridge condos. Again, this is right in the neighborhood, just immediately east, 1.4 units per acre. So the adjustments that you were recommending at the last meeting got very close. If we applied the condo density count at 2.5, we land at 1.8 units per acre. So it's either 1.5 or 1.8. If we scroll down a little bit, the High Ridge condos, which is the other condominium project right in the neighborhood, now just west of the project area, the density there is a little bit higher. Gulf Ridge has a little bit more open space, outlot, wooded area. High Ridge does not have that. It's got some woods, but it's on lot rather than a large outlot. So at any rate, at 2.8, what we were finding is that that density is actually very similar to what you recommended for zones 5 and 6 on the south end, almost precisely. And then Jake, help me get to the newer condominium examples.
Go to the word icon.
There we go. So these were a couple of projects that the work group relied on heavily and generally favored as we were working through deliberating over uses. This is the Glen at Sussex Creek, newer project, last 10 years, just a little west of the Meyer, right in the Pewaukee, Sussex border area. The Glen is a name you'll see all around the county. The developer kind of recycles that name. A little bit higher density here. You can see the area in yellow, generally shows the aerial. There is some open space that's off-site that's not part of that 3.4 units per acre count, that wooded area just to the south. Another project that the committee looked at quite a bit, this is out at Pabst Farms. Condo project called The Crossing at Pabst Farms. 5 units per acre. Again, that count can be a little misleading. There is substantial open space, a large water feature immediately west. It's hard to dissect, is it part of the condo project or is it part of the adjacent larger development? So just giving you some visuals because, when we talk about units per acre, we always found with the work group that it was helpful to have something to put your arms around and know what it looks like, so to speak. One last exhibit that I wanted to show, and Jake, I'm looking for height here. There we go. One of the points of conversation last time was adjusting the 2-story versus 3-story, and this was something that I forgot to mention during that discussion. When we did the Okachi project for the town of Oconomowoc a few years ago, the work group that worked on that project favored going actually up to 4 stories, much different environment, urban environment. But they they only favored going to 4 stories if the 4th story was designed into the roof line, so to speak. So just wanted to show you a few representative images. This is an office building not too far from here over at Highway 83, where you can see that 3rd story is achieved in dormers. The roof line doesn't really go any higher than it would on a 2-story building. This is an office building on the Pewaukee lakefront, right across from the beach. Again, 2nd story designed into the roof line. And then finally, this is a mixed-use building in the Brookfield Village area, a couple of residential stories above, 1st floor retail. And so just wanted to give you a little more food for thought as you continue discussing here tonight. So I think that's all I kind of wanted to hit real quickly. Here to help answer questions, of course, as always.
2 questions, both on height, so timely on the last slides. If you went back to that 3-story office building where the 3rd story was in the roof line, that one there, do you know what the building height is on that? Is that within the 47 feet that we set in the code?
I don't recall the specific height on this. If Jake sifted through some documents, he could probably put his finger on it.
And then the very first set of pictures you showed us were when you were looking at the lot sizes, but you said you took pictures of the neighboring houses, and it was for the height. That project was for height, and I think the consensus was 35 foot was kind of normal or average, and yet some of the pictures looked like a tall 2-story building. So I'm assuming in those neighboring communities, some of the houses are in the standard 45 to 55 foot range.
I think we found that most of the homes in the immediately surrounding area were actually closer to 30 or upper 20s, and there were a couple outliers. I think there was maybe one house that was over 35. With that said, if we look more broadly and we go look at the areas on the lake as a for instance, it would be very common to get well over 40. The county ordinance allows 42 feet by right, 44 with unique offsetting parameters. We've got a no more than 3 stories as viewed from the water limit. So, you know, residential height is not ordinarily capped at 2 stories. That was a provision that we brought forward really to try and match what the surrounding neighborhood had as far as single family for single family. Again, the work group thought that slightly taller buildings were acceptable and perhaps even desirable from a potential noise blocking and kind of setting an edge along I-94. That was the rationale for why they landed on 3 where they did.
Anyone with questions for Jason at this point?
At the moment. Thanks, Jason.
All right, so I've given some thought on how to attack this, and we spent the last meeting going zone by zone by zone by zone, provision by provision. This time I thought we'd go by plan commission member and provide thoughts, comments, motions. And I thought we'd start with seniority. So with that, I would ask if Ed would like to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, for me, it really comes down to density and the density of this project and the maximum density. I believe we're at what's the number we're at, like 410, 406 units right now, maximum allowable density?
404.
I mean, just looking at the surrounding neighborhoods, you got the Thomas Land, High Ridge, Gulf Ridge, High Ridge East Edition 1, High Point Estates. You got 157 lots on 242 total acres. There's been a lot of talk about High Ridge Condos. High Ridge Condos adds another, 36 units on 12.4 acres, 2.89 as Jason has mentioned. So that brings the overall, density of the neighborhood, just using, taking the emotion out of it, just using data points, as a reasonable and prudent person that I am. 193, residential units on 254 acres. The density acres per unit, 1.32, density units per acre, 0.76. And then of that, we're talking about High Ridge condos. And, at the end of the day, that's only 5% of the entire neighborhood. So applying that 5% to the 152 acres of the Thomas property, that's 7.43 acres. Right now, I got, the density chart of what we're talking about, 410, overall, units. We're currently at, a density of 2.7, to exactly match, what I've calculated here. It should be maximum density of 200. At the last meeting, I think I can live with, 275, 250, which puts it between 1.8 and 1.64. To, just be transparent about this, when we're talking about the 410 units, yes, 206 of those units is allowed on Zone 4 right now, of the 36 acres. But just to put that in perspective, that's a density units per acre of 5.72. That's a really intense, very dense use for Zone 4. But then, the rest of the 116 acres is, you got 204 units, you're at 1.76. You're, more in line with the rest of the neighborhood. So, this isn't my first rodeo here when we've talked development. And, every time we've talked to development, it's always about density, water, and traffic. And I just think that the majority of the folks up here, we live on the north side of the town of Delafield, north of Pewaukee Lake. And when, GE wanted to build a training center, and when that area was developed, the neighbors came out, the residents came out, the plan commission had a discussion about density, a discussion about traffic, and they weighed all those. And the neighborhoods up there are the way they are because of what the plan commission did and kind of the tone that the plan commission set at the time. So I just really question why we're entertaining such intensive, density on this last piece of property here. We're going to hear that it's a unique piece of property. It's unique. It's along I-94. But quite frankly, every property in the town of Delafield is unique or has some unique feature or some unique. I just, really would like to hear from my other commissioners this evening, why they feel that we need to swing the pendulum a lot farther than I think we need to allow what is allowed with this density. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any proposed motion or amendments, or just?
We need to give this density a haircut. I just don't feel, based on the last meeting and after rewatching the last meeting, that there's an appetite of my other commissioners to even entertain that. So, if there's an appetite to discuss it and to, try to, lower the density, but I kind of got the sense after, rewatching the last meeting that I was kind of on an island and everybody was ready to pass the thing. So, we'll see how this evening shakes out.
Okay. Next most senior, Nicole.
I'm still going through some of Ed's numbers here, Mr. Kranick's numbers. I know we've done a significant haircut based on our last meeting. I think it would be interesting to go through, to play it out with a recommendation based on Mr. Kranick's information to see what is possible and what is not. I do think that with its existing location, and I know that it does not sit well, that it is a unique piece of property because of where it is on that frontage road. I think that there is some type of mixed use that should be able to be born from this. I know we're getting down to the numbers on this, and I'm glad that everyone is taking that as seriously as possible, but I think that's worth a discussion if Mr. Krennic is bringing forward these numbers to see where this might fit. I'm unsure, based on just a cursory view of this, at that 200 level that you're proposing, how that exactly works with condos, and if that completely abolishes any type of other elements that have been put into the existing district. So I think if, with Mr. Krennic bringing forward this, it's worth a discussion on how that might play out.
Okay.
I guess I'm also interested in discussing with Mr. Krennic further. You know, going back to how this all started, it was supposed to be a kumbaya moment, and I don't think it's turned into that. And so I think if we go back to this, we're supposed to be sort of a judicial plan commission here, and not even possibly drafting ordinances. And so that's something where I think we want to make sure we're very careful on how we do this so we don't upset either side. And I think that was the intent all along, and it's not happening. So I'm absolutely open for conversation, and would like to continue with it. I'm not going to disagree with Mr. Krennic. I think you watching the video isn't necessarily what I saw when I rewatched it. So I think everyone's listening and trying to do what's best for the community.
Ron? Any thoughts?
Accepting the numbers Ed's put out here at 1.32, we've received numerous emails. I can't even tell you how many emails we've received that show a hierarchy of what the residents want to see with this land. And the third number, number one is they all want to see this stay a farm. The third number out of 4 is, and I'll quote, assuming it cannot match the same densities, residents feel double the density is a very reasonable compromise. That's in numerous emails we received from residents. Now, I'm not a math whiz, but if the current density in Mr. Krennic's form is 1.32, if you double that, we're at 2.64. And I think we're pretty close to that, or even slightly below that from our last meeting at 404 units. Is that correct, Jason?
When I take a look overall, it gets a little complicated because now you've added a 2 or 2.5 scenario. But I'm finding 2.7 or 2.6, depending upon which of those buttons you pick. So I think you're pretty close.
So, in using Mr. Krennic's number, double the density, which the residents say is a, quote, very reasonable compromise, is at 2.64. So.
Who said that? No one in this room said that.
No one said that.
So, I think the 1.32 is too low. I was comfortable with the 404 units. What I'm really trying to retain, and what makes this a unique project, is that the ordinance requires a master development plan for all 152 acres. And as many times as I've said it, that is extremely unique. In fact, I've been told it's not been done before, where you have property that's owned by different owners. Nobody owns all of it. There's different owners. You're making them all develop it under one plan. Woodridge Estates was not developed like that. And part of that master development plan is a traffic study will be required. a water study will be required, an environmental impact study, and a sanitary district study, all required. If we lose the master development plan, we didn't do a traffic study for Woodridge Estates. We haven't done a traffic study for any development we've built. We haven't done well or water studies. We've done cursory sanitary district studies, but nothing in the detail that we're talking about here. So we give up the master development plan requirement. We give up those things that I consider are extremely important to this development. And to get that master development, me personally, I'm willing to accept slightly higher density because the landowner has to agree with it. If the landowner says, I don't want a master development, they take us to court, we will lose. It's really that simple. And then we'll lose the master development requirement. So this is a unique property.
Casey? Casey?
Well, first off, Mr. Kranick, thank you for putting your time and thought and consideration in this and giving us really the platform for rediscussing density. I am open to working back through the plan to discuss those levels of density. As Mr. Frank suggested, I think we all set off on this endeavor very well intended. I think we can all acknowledge that this land will not be a farm forever, and we have lots of shareholders, not only in this room, but also at this table, that we have to work through the plan diligently and be thinking long-term. Candidly, it's the density, from my perspective, I think we can do some work on it, particularly Zone 4. I'm concerned about the impact as far as the maximum number of units, and I'm open to working back through it.
Okay. Thank you. I'll go last. I guess I took a couple of comments that Jason made to heart, that we did what we talked about doing last month, which is we all agreed that the 6-zone approach was the best way to approach the plan development for this property. The idea always being that those zones adjacent to other residential developments would have lower density. We reduced the density on 5 of the 6 units, and based on Jason's math, it appears that they generally, Zone 2 pretty much matches Gulf Ridge, Zones 5 and 6 match, High Ridge condos. Where we've done, we've done that, and then, yes, we look at Zone 4, and Zone 4 was always intended to be the high-intensity zone because it doesn't border any residential property and it only faces the interstate. And to have, a density there of 6 units per acre is the reason why the density on the overall project is what it is. I don't know that there's value in reducing units on a zone-by-zone basis if we're going to leave Zone 4 as is, and if we're going to just take units out of Zone 4 to get 404 down to some smaller number. Again, I'm not seeing the value in that, particularly if we have to give up the master development plan. Like Ron, I think that is worth its weight in gold. I've seen, in the city of Delafield, when I was on the planning commission, we required master development plans, and it worked better than not having it. So anyways. I do have one idea that I think has merit, which is to allow units to be moved from the outer units to the inner zone, outer zones to the inner zones, to even further reduce the density in zones 2 and 3 and 6. But without reducing the overall density of the project. So I still think that could be viewed as a win-win in that it gets the density in zones 2 and 3 down, perhaps, but doesn't take, value off of the proposition. So I guess I'll make a motion to amend the master development plan section of the current PUD ordinance to allow for the movement of up to 40 units from zones 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 to Zone 4 as part of the master development plan, which means it would be subject to Plan Commission approval.
That's your motion?
Yeah.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion, thoughts?
The density overall project doesn't change, though.
No, we're just,
We're
we're,
shifting,
we're reducing the
Right.
density in the outer zones
the outer zones are what, the
By the-
northern zones,
by the, yeah,
Yeah.
to the middle zone.
to the middle zone.
I do have a question, Kevin. When you were on the city board, you mentioned that you would have a master development plan. Was that prior to the zoning, or was that, so you would develop an ordinance similar to this, or how was
No, it was
that?
part of the it was part of the PUD process, and it only applied to land owned by a single landowner.
Okay.
So if you owned 600 acres and wanted to develop 150, we wouldn't let you,
Okay,
unless you told us what you were gonna do with the other
okay.
150. But a lot of it had to do with road connectivity, which is an issue here.
Right,
If these develop independently, we don't know where the roads will necessarily connect, trail systems, the parks, all of the things that are in the master development plan that I think most of the people liked, are things that we really do want to preserve on this parcel, so.
okay.
Any other thoughts, questions?
I think you're just playing a shell game, quite honestly. I mean, unless we're gonna seriously reduce the overall density of this project, I mean, you're just playing a shell game. I mean, if you could bring your computer back up and just look at the GIS there and look at the surrounding neighborhoods. I mean, we're talking about, 410 rooftops.
404.
I mean, we're all, proud of ourselves and shaking our, giving each other high fives here because, at the last meeting, we knocked off, 50 units. I mean, why are we swinging the pendulum so far to allow such an intensive use of this property? I mean, it's, it should be really concerning to everybody here when you read in the red line version of this ordinance, the existing sewer system was designed for a density of 5 people per acre. 5 people per acre. I mean, I just don't understand why we are even entertaining such intensive high-density use on this property. The optics on this are just not good, and it's really disappointing, I mean.
Well, then we need to change the land use. I mean, the land use is commercial and office park, we changed it to mixed use. It got stalled at the county. We tried to draft an ordinance for a mixed-use zoning. So if we want single-family, low-density residential, then the land use has to change.
Well, I mean, we're talking about, the whole thing being at a density of High Ridge. And like I stated in my opening comments, High Ridge is 5% of the entire neighborhood. I mean, this is just asinine. I live on 3 acres. If this passes, I'm going to come and I'm going to say, hey, I want my land use changed and my zoning changed. And, the developer types on the work group say, I need 20 condo units to make this thing viable. I mean, just saying that out loud just sounds asinine. And that's what we're doing here this evening. And it's frustrating. And it's not right.
So are you saying to change the land use to R2? Is that what you're
No,
implying?
I don't know.
I mean, what are we saying?
It would not be the plan commission making the change.
Right.
It would be the.
Well, that's why I was
property owner making the
confused, right?
change,
It would have to be
you know.
the property owner requesting, and there's 3 different property owners, correct?
7, I think.
Well, as far as different
3
lots,
parcels, yeah.
3 plots.
Well, we have a motion on the table and seconded, so let's take a vote on that. This is to allow for the movement of up to 40 units from zones 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 to zone 4. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, it doesn't pass. Okay. It did not pass.
It was a tie. 3 people voted for it, 3 people voted against it. Because it's a motion to change something, it has to have unanimous vote,
A majority vote.
or majority vote, rather. so it failed.
So if we're back to discussion then, and if the master plan is out, right? So we lose the ability to take a look at all of how this might be developed in uniform. If we're advocating that it has to meet, back to something else other than commercial, something other than mixed use, is that what we're ultimately saying here? Or one of the paths, I guess, in the conversation?
I mean, I think if we don't do anything, the county rejects the land use change and it stays commercial and office park.
At 80% green space.
Yeah.
And so that it is viable then that a commercial development could go up there still?
15 office buildings.
Could the current owners come in and request a different zoning change, one that is currently available?
Land use change.
Land use change, sorry.
Yeah. They could.
Well, they could come in and request a different land use change. They could come in and request that we lower the green space, since 80% is, to my knowledge, the highest,
It's ridiculous.
maybe in the whole state, I don't know, but definitely in the county. And if we didn't change it, then they could always file litigation against us. But I don't think the town can change the,
I don't think the town should. I think the landowner needs to come in and do that.
that's what I was saying, if you don't mind me finish.
Sorry, Mr.
Yeah, I don't think the town has the authority, the legal authority to go in and make changes, that the landowner needs to come in and request it from the town, just like they did this time. The landowner came to request the land use change and went through the plan commission. Mr. Kranick voted for it. At the board level, all commissioners voted for it, with the exception of Billy Cooley, who voted against it because he wanted to see a traffic study before he approved the land use change, which candidly doesn't make sense, because how do you do a traffic study before you know what's going on in the land? So, but he voted against it. The other board members who voted for it. So. All this body does is, if they pass something, they make a recommendation to the town board, and then the 5 board members vote, and that's when it becomes an ordinance, or that's when it fails, or that's when they send it back to the plan commission with suggestions and recommendations for revising.
So to bring it back around then, as far as the steps for this evening, where are we at?
We could move to approve it as written. We could modify it and move to approve it. We could move to disapprove it. Or we could move, I don't know, I think those are the 3 options.
Well, I think some areas need to be modified. For example, to me, it makes no sense at all to have the entire town of Delafield have a 47 or 45-foot height restriction. And on this property, we have 35 feet along Gulf Road. It just defies logic that along Gulf Road, we have the smallest height buildings from anywhere else in the town. I think the Gulf Road height restriction should match or mirror the rest of the town and be at 45 feet.
Do you have 45 foot next to your house?
There's no discussion. This is the board discussion. So, it makes no sense to me that the whole town is 45 feet with the exception of Gulf Road, which is 35 feet. So I'd like to make a motion that we modify the latest version of the ordinance to change the height restriction along Gulf Road back to what was originally proposed of 45 feet in section, well, just to match the rest of the town,
Zone 4, 5, and 6.
in zone 4, 5, and 6.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. I tend to agree on that, Ron. I mean, the current zoning code says 45 for single-family house, 55 feet if they increase setback by 10 feet. That's the current code for every parcel of land in the town. I think keeping the 35 feet in zones 1, 2, and 3 seems reasonable, given the proximity to the other residential neighbors that seem to fit in that height restriction. Although I'm pretty sure a couple of the houses were above 35 feet. But on the interstate, the idea that some of these could actually be sound barriers to the inner properties makes sense to me in a lot of ways, so. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
Okay, passes 5-1. Okay. Any other specific comments, edits, motions?
I have a comment about Zone 1, and, you know, if we need to get a legal opinion, we need to get a legal opinion, but, I mean, we're talking about, you know, Zone 1 is gonna be accessed through an extension there of Crooked Creek. That subdivision, High Ridge East Edition 1 was platted back in 1995. Reading our design standards, our 18.06 code, there was an ordinance created back in 1988, number 88-200, that stated that all developments serving 15 or more units shall be connected to the existing street network by a minimum of 2 roadways. So I just don't know how we can add additional units to an already quote-unquote non-conforming cul-de-sac addition, especially one that was, you know, platted after our cul-de-sac ordinance was passed.
Well, we have approved cul-de-sacs longer than that, so it must be.
This has got
with some-
nothing to do with the length. This has got the number of units on it.
It's an exception to the ordinance, which the board has the authority to
Yeah,
authorize.
the new ordinance would specifically exempt this road from the existing ordinance.
Yeah.
That's the way it was
Well, I
written.
mean, the
it's
only
just
thing
the-
that I read in here is the extension of the 1,000 feet, which is okay, because I know that we've done this on the past, but I don't believe that we've made that extension on a kind of a non-conforming cul-de-sac in the past. And, you know, I know that it's, you know, labeled as PEC, but has anybody actually gone out there and delineated it and looked at it? I mean, are we talking about a bunch of buckthorn in there? Or, I mean, I know the sewer pack and the PEC is just delineated based on, you know, aerial photographs, basically. So I just, you know, just want to raise that concern that, you know, I just don't think we can, you know, violate our own ordinance in allowing that extension at this point. And like I said, if we need a legal opinion, we need to go and get a legal opinion on that.
So in your opinion, Mr. Kranek, how does that differ from Norm's Road?
I don't think we added more than 15 units on that thing.
Pretty close.
Which one?
Norm's Road?
No, it's not 15 units.
No, it's-
The
With the
development was,
existing?
the development was limited to 8 units because of that.
And what about the existing?
Pardon?
If there's 8 units there, and it's 15?
I think there's 7 other ones that access Norm's Road. Or they could have 14, that's whatever the number was, they were limited by that. But we did allow the extension of the cul-de-sac to be longer on that one. So, I just want to point out, in code section 18.10, it's called modifications and exceptions. It's not used very often in the town of Delafield. It's used in other communities that I've worked for, and it does, if you want to read it, it does allow flexibility, or it allows the town board, you know, to relax certain codes, if there's a difficulty or hardship provided, you know, that's not a detriment to the public good and without impairing the intent and purpose of the chapter. You know,
And I believe we also had the fire chief sign off on the
Sure.
extension.
We do. Plus, this is the least objectionable zone in And isn't this 1 acre lots, 8 homes? And the alternative to adding the I'm really confused. The alternative to extending the cul-de-sac is to cut a road over through Elmhurst, all through the environmental corridor?
I'm just saying
makes
that,
no sense.
I'm just saying that, you know, we're either gonna allow the extension and allow the 8 homes, but, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, this thing needs a haircut as far as density. I know that, you know, certain members here, you know, would have passed this thing at the 464, you know, a month ago. But, you know, I just want to raise the concern that, you know, from a public safety perspective, you know, we have an ordinance that was created. You know, I guess I'm raising it also because this subdivision was platted in 1995. So I'm just, you know, am curious what the plan was or what the idea was of the future. I mean, so, you know, when you do this and you talk about this, you know, the developers, they have their visions, they have their designers, they have their cocktail napkins. I mean, I'm just curious, you know, what the thoughts were and what the plans were for the road connections here, because that's, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, when you start approving this stuff, you kind of have a master plan.
I've driven it, and it's at the end of the road that abuts zone 1. It just stops. There's no turnaround, it just stops. So my common sense, not the brightest guy in the room, but my common sense says that the master plan the developer had was someday it would just continue to go forward as this ordinance would put it. Just go into zone, it's the least offensive for the whole area. It's not cutting into any environmental corridor. And it's the least disruptive to the environment. It's to just have it go forward, and I don't have any problem with it at all. I think from appearances, it was always the intention.
Yeah. Mr. Kranick, I don't know the history of why it stopped there, but I can tell you that I think, you know, in years before 1995, in the 80s, environmental issues were not taken as seriously as they are now.
Agreed.
By the DNR, by communities. I mean, now we have the ability to map those and to know where they're at. I know the wetlands were first delineated in I would say in between 85 and 90. You know, so it's not. I mean, now we have so many regulations about environmental. I mean, I'm not sure if we would be able to get a road through there. And I'm not sure if we want to meet some of the goals of our land use plan in our codes that talk about, you know, preserving environmental areas. I mean, we talk about being responsible. That's the responsible thing, and this town's done a good job of not getting into those, not touching them. And that's what this.
Well, let's just not touch it, period. Let's just leave it environmental. Let's just leave it, you know, let's just leave it untouched and unscathed.
So zone 1 can't be built out at all?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying that, you know, let's take zone 1 off the table. I mean, if we're so concerned about the environmental and doing the responsible thing.
There's no environmental corridor mapped at the end of the cul-de-sac. I've got the inventory up. Again, it hasn't been field delineated, but the sewer pack inventory doesn't go as far as the stub. Again, that tree line was recommended in part for preservation to keep a buffer, you know, for the subdivision to the west. Not the whole thing, but there's a strip on the open space map.
I'm not in favor of that at all. Let's see where we are. I think according to what Jason said, we're at 2.6 overall is the current revision from our last meeting. Roughly, 2.6, 2.65. Using Mr. Kranick's numbers and the emails from the residents, 2.6, again, is a very reasonable compromise. So, with that in mind, I'd like to make the motion to accept the ordinance as redlined in tonight's package with the one change that we've already approved regarding the height along section 4, 5, and 6 along Gulf Road. So a motion to approve as redlined in tonight's package.
A second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Pass 4-2. So what we'll do is make a recommendation to the town board to approve the red line package with the height along Gulf Road, section 4, 5, and 6, to go to 45 feet.
Item 4B, I assume we make the same conforming edits, Jason, correct? Or do you guys do that?
As far as a recommendation, we're just looking for a recommendation. The county has drafted an ordinance.
Do you want us to make the same amendment before we recommend it?
I mean, it's your call, it's your motion, but certainly it would seem, because the intent has been to keep the two ordinances identical the whole way along, it would seem that that would be expected.
Okay. All right.
So, you lost me there. You
We
want-
need a motion to approve the county shoreland ordinance amendment to create the Plan Development District 1 with the one height change in zones 4, 5, and 6.
Okay. So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Hey. Yes, it's 4-2. Okay.
Discussion none. Next meeting, June 1st. I'll be around. Item 8. Yeah. Item 8,
I think we'll have a new plan commissioner at that meeting too.
We do.
we'll have an odd number. Woo-hoo. Won't have a 3 number.
I've been here at Lowe's.
Item 8.
Make a motion to adjourn?
All in favor?
Second.
There we go.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. And I'm
Nay.
done.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious.
Okay. Dan, Ed voted nay to adjourn for the minutes.
Okay.